At a prestigious Japanese school, students couldn't help but gossip about two of their student council members. Rumors circulated about the pair spreading each other open like loaves of bread. However, the students, Suzune and Kazuki, were less bothered about it, as they were more concerned with keeping up their goody two-shoes act for the public. They were always the center of attention because they looked less of a baboon when compared to the others who were apparently Lord of the Flies, cast in disguise. Even more, they held the two most important roles, student council president and vice president. On the other hand, there was the ugly, uninteresting NPC Usato, who had only 2 friends and could probably go missing without anyone caring. At least he wouldn't get lost in a crowd of 3. He helped up a fallen nest of birds and asked them to thank him, explaining why he was a class reject. He had so few friends that even his shadow stopped following him. Later that day, it was raining, and someone had mob psychoed Usato's umbrella. He considered stealing someone else's umbrella, but he stopped midway, not wanting to taint his already wasted reputation any further, so he sat down, hoping for a solution to drop from the sky, and luckily for him, one did, or so it seems. Standing right in front of him was the student council president, Suzune, who was surprised to see another student at school that late. She asked why he hadn't left, and he explained how his umbrella grew legs and divorced him. When Suzune informed him he had to leave school soon since it would be closed, Usato suggested he would head out under the rain that way. Successfully guilt-tripped, the student council president refused to allow him to go in the rain. Just then, her assistant arrived and suggested they give Usato his spare umbrella. When Suzune asked how her vice president knew Usato, Kazuki explained that he crammed the names of all the non-purpose characters. If I were Usato, he'd definitely go back home with only one of his balls intact and the other in his mouth. But still, they introduced each other better and suggested they went home together, as Usato, the third-tier character, had hit his Go Home with the 2 most popular characters event. While the 3 students walked home, discussing random things, Usato brought up the rumors about them getting freaky with each other. Surprisingly, the pair weren't doing special late-night exercises together like the rumors claimed. After getting that out of the way, Suzune asked Usato what he planned on doing after school, a question the dialogue loop victim failed woefully because he couldn't think that far. When Kazuki asked why she brought up that question again, the president started talking like a psycho-conspiracy theorist, insisting there was a bigger purpose beyond for her. She was adamant that she didn't belong in their world, confusing Usato, who didn't expect loony statements like that from Miss Perfect. Suddenly, as the group entered a park, the president and her vice started hearing mysterious bells. It seemed to be a main character event, as Usato, the loading screen filler, could hear nothing except the council members lamenting. When he stepped forward to calm them down, a weird ray of gold light started shooting out from the floor, confusing the 3 students. They were getting blasted with air they couldn't understand, and when the potato head wondered if it was an isekai gate, Kazuki asked him what nonsense he was onto. When Suzune began to weeb out as well, talking about it being an isekai gate, Kazuki realized he was the only one with working brain cells in the group. Before long, everything went dark, as all that was left from the trio was Suzune's umbrella. When Usato came to, Kazuki had been trying to wake him up for a while. They were in a mysterious church, surrounded by strange people in hideous clothes, like they had bought them from a cheap Renaissance market. When Usato asked for the president, he regretted his decision quicker than a gotcha pull, as she was acting freaky right beside him, salivating that they were in an isekai. When the man in front of them began to address them, Kazuki was having none of it, as he interrupted the man and asked what freak show they had been dragged to. A guard felt his king was disrespected and shouted at Kazuki, yet the man calmed his guard down and explained to Kazuki that he understood why he was upset. He introduced himself as the king of the Linger Kingdom. At this point, Suzune freaked out even more, like a baddie on Cloud 9 about the new world. The king continued explaining that they were summoned as heroes to help the kingdom defeat a dastardly demon king. For every isekai term the king mentioned, Suzune became even weirder, making Usato question why he admired a freaky weeb of that level. Even for an NPC like him, she was reaching new lows with that negative level of aura loss. Seeing these unending shenanigans, Kazuki crashed out like a monkey high on coke, challenging the senile old fart for dragging them to the isekai without their permission. He demanded the foolish king send him and his friends back to their world. Sadly for him, the king informed him it was impossible because summoning was a one-way spell. When Kazuki attempted to charge forward and confront the king again, he was promptly put in his place by the guards, who pointed their spears at him like a fork, preparing to go into chicken thighs. As Usato tried to hold him back, the king, in the most surprising twist, stepped up to the group and fell to the floor like your exhausted joystick, apologizing for stupidly dragging them in and promising to send them back as soon as they knew how to. When Suzune asked how they knew the trio were heroes, the mage informed them that hearing the bells confirmed they were the chosen heroes. After this update about the bells, Kazuki remembered Usato couldn't hear them at all. They realized his dumbass was just dragged into the fray for no reason, making the king and his followers look even more stupid. Moments later, the group were taken to a room with a crystal ball where they would test out their magic. When Kazuki asked Usato how he was feeling, knowing he was just a victim of the kingdom's idiocy, the side quest Reject informed his friend he was totally fine knowing he was just dead weight. While the two had their discussion, Suzune was busy getting freaked out about the crystal, like a psychopath weeb. When the mage informed them it was ready to assess their magic, Suzune rushed forward and checked out hers first. After she placed her hands on the ball, it began to glow with a yellow light, confirming Suzune had the power of lightning magic. When Kazuki tested for his own magic, the crystal ball shone white, informing the mage he had light magic, the strongest type of magic against the demon lord, and it was incredibly rare, making him a special catch for Linger. Finally, it was time for Usato, who was reluctant to check the crystal ball out of shame. He assumed because he was an unwanted stowaway, he might not possess magic. However, when he touched the crystal ball, it glowed emerald green. When Suzune asked the mage, Welsi, what type of magic it was, she began to panic. She then grabbed Usato's hand and dragged him away, telling the two heroes to wait behind. She rushed into the throne room and told the king about his rare affinity. When the king attempted to laugh off her comment as a joke, he began to shiver like a wet sheep after hearing the crystal ball turned green when Usato touched it. They knew his magic reeked of trouble and wondered where they would send Usato for his own safety, causing Usato to assume the green glowing ball meant toxic waste. When he asked if anyone else had the same magic affinity, the king said there was one other. However, she was a name they didn't like to talk about in the castle. Just then, a freakishly strong, scary tomboy barged into the room, striking fear into the hearts of all the guards. She asked the king whether the summoning ritual was a success, and the old man, who was almost peeing his pants, stuttered, informing her it went well. When the brute lady saw Usato, she asked if he was one of the heroes, a question the king denied quicker than lightning with Wi-Fi. He explained that Usato was just a victim of their crappy ritual, who had no magic at all. When Welsi offered to take Rose, the tomboy, to see the actual heroes, the brute was ready to leave the throne room, until Usato, who couldn't keep his stupid mouth shut, spilled the tea and asked what his green ball meant. Rose was instantly stopped in her tracks like someone who heard a very top secret. Before you could say isekai, Welsi cast a spell to transport Usato away from the castle, but Rose was as monstrous as she looked, chasing after the magical ball carrying Usato and catching up to him. She destroyed the magical ball and grabbed him like my niece's Winnie the Pooh teddy bear, informing the king that he would be in her care from then on. Later in the castle, Welsi informed the heroes that Usato had been taken away. When they asked if he was in danger, Welsi was reluctant to answer, as Rose was an unpredictable loose cannon who was capable of breaking anyone under her wing. The mage informed the heroes that he should be fine, but that seems like the opposite of fine to me though. Regardless, he told them Usato was now part of the kingdom's rescue team because he had an affinity for healing magic. At the rescue team base, Rose introduced herself to Usato and told him he was a healing magic user. When he asked if he was the only one under her wing, she explained that there were 2 other healing magic users. However, they were currently engaging in other assignments. She then called in the other non-magic rescue team members. After the ogre-looking men walked in, Usato wondered if their role was to save lives or end them. When they introduced themselves to Usato, he barely registered any of their names, as he was more concerned about his safety. Seeing that Usato has almost lost his manhood to fear, Rose kicked the monsters away before they'd extinguish her golden boy. When he pleaded to be trained somewhere else, Rose had none of it, telling Usato his training would start the next day and he would be sharing a room with one of the hideous brutes. That night, Usato wondered what horrors awaited him the next day. On the other hand, Rose looked into the moonlight, wondering what level of potential the isekai healing magic user possessed. The next day, Usato woke up and confirmed it wasn't actually a trashy nightmare, as he had actually been isekai'd to a new world. He was snapped out of his thoughts by the disturbing, broken generator-like sounds his roommate, Tong, was making while asleep. Just then, another one of the ogre-looking rescue team members informed him he had guests. It was the two heroes, Suzune and Kazuki, who had come to check up on their plot-proof entity friend. When they asked how he was doing, Usato struggled to tell them he was fine because he knew nothing but the wrath of his new tomboy master awaited him in training. His friends were worried after hearing him mumble about hellish training, but after he assured them he would be fine, they became calm. They then switched to other conversations, as Usato asked how the heroes were doing in their new isekai. He complimented their superhero-looking suits in comparison to the rags he was forced to wear as a rescue team member, while the heroes chatted with their level 1 forever friend. The knight who was tasked with escorting them had been surrounded by the other creepy members of the rescue team. Before long, the Otherworlders were done with their chat, and the heroes were escorted back to the castle. On the other hand, Usato was scared stiff as Rose appeared out of nowhere, informing him his training of despair would start after breakfast. Afterwards, she handed him a journal and told him to put down his cowardly thoughts about the training regimen, as it would be his diary of a wimpy kid. When the time came, Usato was shocked with the order of the day, because all he was asked to do was place his hands over his chest like he was being proposed to. When he informed Rose he felt warmth from his chest, she explained to him it was his mana, and she would teach him how to develop it into proper healing magic. Some moments later, his training transitioned to a study session, making the demonic training rumors seem like Olympic-level cap. Rose handed him a book to learn about the kingdom of Linger, and explained to him that there was no need to worry about his illiteracy, because the magical summoning spell helped anyone transported through completely understand the language of the isekai. Usato began to assume his training would be as easy as eating pie. However, when the second day of training came, he was forced to gulp down that foolish thought like it was a pie of dragon dung. Over the next few days, he was forced to run around like a headless chicken till his legs could run no longer. Did I say couldn't run anymore? Sorry, I meant to say that was the promise Rose made to him. Yet when his legs tapped out on the third day, she hit his sorry ass with healing magic and demanded he continue running till he dropped once more. On the fourth day, he continued the brutal running exercises, but this time he was doing it with the hideous monsters he had as teammates in the rescue group. They ran laps around him and teased him for being slower than a slug with weights on. When he thought it couldn't get any worse, Rose threatened to withhold his dinner if he didn't close up the gap between them. The terrible training continued, till the sixth day, when Usato slipped and crashed in mud, thereby making his sugar mummy, sorry, I meant his big mummy, call him a hopeless failure. When he began to get angry, thinking about the horrid things he would call her in his little diary, his hands started glowing. The first sign of healing magic he was finally displaying. He thought he was finally making progress. However, Rose believed that was just a load of fictional diarrhea. She increased the difficulty of his training and became even more aggressive with him, hauling him around like a bag of garbage till he was forced to master applying healing magic on himself. The latter parts of his training included addition of weights to his runs of Doom and 1,000 sets of push-ups, which he managed to adapt to using healing magic, but the rescue team just wouldn't let him catch a break. On the 14th day, his lunch was phantom taxed by Tong, leading to an unnecessary goose chase between the roomies. Usato had been so mind-wrecked by the training he didn't realize his slow ass was being groomed. Some days later, the hideous healer had guests again, and this time they were escorted by an important-looking company. When the hideous rescue team member showed the group where Usato was, they were entirely shocked to see what sort of horrendous training their alleged healer was going through. He was doing push-ups. However, not only was there a ginormous block of stone on his back, there was also the incredible gorilla in a woman's cosplay, Rose, sitting atop the block. After her minion completed his sets, Rose rage baited him into calling her featherweight load, causing the psychotic healer to add another huge block to his routine, almost crushing the NPC ant in half. Nevertheless, he withstood the pressure and toughened himself up with healing magic as he continued his sets with a new back-breaking addition. When the heroes saw how intense Usato's training was, Kazuki was worried about his friend. However, the freaky Suzune was more bothered about how ripped he had become, salivating like a crazy K-pop fanatic after seeing his biceps. Fortunately for the healer, the knight who had escorted them couldn't bear to see the doom-flavored training, so he walked up to Rose and confronted her by asking why she was putting the Otherworlder through all that. He grabbed her collar and demanded she set him free of her demonic training at once, but Rose refused, reminding the knight named Siglis that while he had the two MC heroes to deal with, the background extra with dialogue, Usato, was hers to train. She liberated herself from the knight's weak hold, then told Usato he was free to go for a lunch break. At least the little boy is now free from his push-ups of despair. While the knight continued to trade words with the nonchalant Rose, Usato left with the heroes and their guest, hoping to tell them more about his bizarre training. They picked the side of a tree to talk, and the group created a picnic setting to feast off the snacks the heroes brought. They informed him that the knight who escorted them was the head of the kingdom's force and their swordsmanship master, surprising Usato, who could barely comprehend that level of importance. When the hideous healer asked who the mysterious girl the heroes had brought along was, she introduced herself as Celia Linger, a name that sounded familiar to the tutorial skipper. When she confirmed his assumption that Linger meant Linger, like the kingdom, he dropped to the floor like an overused willy, apologizing for not bowing to the princess earlier. I mean, he did see the tiara and gold hair earlier, right? After his overly dramatic display, she asked him to pack up his exaggerated shenanigans, because she was fine just being called Celia without any royal special treatment. Following the introductions, they started eating the snacks and talking about the differences in their training sessions and how effective they had been in helping them grow. Suddenly, while Kazuki was about to talk, Suzune entered her simp mode once more, without any trigger. She leaped forward and opened up Usato's shirt to admire his abs. Maybe she pulled something that bizarre, just because they were in the uncouth rescue team's territory. Regardless, after getting Suzune's carnal impulses out of the way, Kazuki asked Usato whether he was fine with his training. He explained that although he was initially constantly writing curses about the training and the Disney-level antagonists he was forced to put up with as the rescue team, he had now started to enjoy training. He then impressed the group by showing them how much he had gotten the hang of using healing magic. Just then, Tong appeared, telling Usato he brought him his lunch. However, he wasn't buying the Mr. Nice Guy horse poop the ogre was selling, leading to a confrontation between the two coked-up hamsters. The heroes realized that although it was a bit weird, their friend had started to adapt to the new world. That night, after the heroes had left, the healer soaked in a hot tub bath, thinking about how much he had developed. He remembered Rose telling him his duty as a rescue team member was to run around providing help to allies, which explained the headless chicken exercises. He then steeled his resolve inside the tub, promising to be useful when his time to help came. The next day, Rose chugged a bag at her minion, blasting him off his chair, before telling him they were heading out, and the ogres gasped in surprise. It was time for his first big assignment. They left the kingdom walls and walked to a cliff, where Rose showed her useless student the darkness of Linger Forest. Suddenly, Rose told Usato he would be going in to capture and kill a grand grizzly. Before he could think isekai and complain excessively, Rose grabbed him like a rag doll and flinged him into the forest, setting him up for his first grand adventure. After being flung into the terrifying forest, the healer managed to cushion his fall by coating his body in healing magic like it was some kind of Dragon Ball ki. When he got up and recovered, he convinced himself that defeating a grand grizzly would be as simple as getting ignored by the tens at his old school. However, when fate decided to test out that assumption, his cowardly ass couldn't handle the smoke as he ran away with anime protagonist speed. After running away from his assignment for a while, he decided to face the monster head-on, believing there was no way it would be half as strong as Rose. But yet again, the universe decides to balance up his theories by adding 2 more bears to the equation, forcing the healer to continue his Olympic relay race. When Usato heard a waterfall nearby, he increased his pace and leaped into it like Tom Cruise from Mission Impossible. Upon seeing their prey had fish-dipped into the river, the bears left, giving the healer what could be at least a few more hours or days before they'd send him to his great-grandmama. A few hours later, he set up camp in a tree and dried his clothes, thankful that he had survived his encounter with the death beasts. While he cleared his bag and brought out stale bread to eat, he cussed Rose for putting him through the worst moments of his life. Other characters had harems, feasts, and funny adventures in their isekai, yet he was stuck with a lunatic boss, mentally fried colleagues, and hunting unfaithful bears in his. Subsequent to finishing his daily ration of food, he marked the tree he slept on to record his first night in the forest. The next day, he scouted his surroundings, looking for the Grand Grizzly's caves. He ran around, jumping from bush to bush like low-budget ninjas. Eventually, he came across an injured dark rabbit who could barely hop. Upon healing the wounded rodent, it refused to divorce him. When he tried communicating with the rabbit, it seemed all his wasted time speaking to animals in the old world, like a low-budget Dr. Animo, paid off, as the rabbit responded to his words with gestures. So he convinced the rabbit to lead him towards the Grand Grizzly's cave. Moments later, he arrived at their hideout and realized the 3 bears from before were family. They looked so cute sleeping together, making him wish he could change the play to something as sweet as Goldilocks and the 3 bears with the different flavored beans. Or how did the story go? However, he promptly snapped back to reality, remembering how eager the bears were to turn him into a sweet Christmas barbecue. After marking the trail to the bears, he went to a nearby stream to fill his canister with water, hoping it was at least consumable. Unfortunately for his dumbass, it wasn't, and it ended up giving him a sickening stomach issue. He managed to survive by healing himself with his magic and getting a better water supply from his new friend, the Black Bunny. Suddenly, the bunny began to shake out of fear, surprising Usato, who noticed the bunny wasn't scared of the death bears. He wondered what level of monster could actually faze his companion. When he saw the monster in question, he was paralyzed with fear, making it clear just how hideously frightening the monster was. It was a large white serpent, which looked like it had just spawned from hell. After the design error left the scene, the scared healer could finally breathe, hoping he had nothing to do with that hell-made accident. He spent the next few days behaving like a tsundere while debating himself on whether or not it was time to go after the death bears. When he finally convinced himself he was ready, he was stupidly manipulated otherwise yet again, this time by his rabbit companion. Finally, the next day, he was ready, and he set after the grizzly bears from hell. But yet, in a surprising twist, the bears had been massacred before he got there, leaving nothing but bare rug material for him to go after. When he checked the scars, he realized it was the work of the evil serpent he saw nights before. Just then, the bear's cub crawled out from under the rubble it had been buried in. It was distraught to see its parents brutally turned into unappealing kebabs, causing the young death bear to wail out in pain. Even though no one asked, the dumb healer declared that he would avenge the bear and go after the murderer of its parents. Meanwhile, the heroes had gone to the rescue team base to check up on their friend. After Tong informed them he had been out for 10 days with Rose, Kazuki began to worry, but he was instantly comforted when Suzune reminded him Usato had been training with the ogres in human disguises called the rescue team. For the next few hours, he entered a training montage where he sharpened a wooden spike like a caveman and prepared to go into battle. After convincing the bunny to lead him towards the monster against its will, they spent hours going from tree to tree, till eventually they encountered the reptile. It was battling the cub it orphaned and about to send the hopeless bear to meet its parents, but Usato wouldn't let that happen as he went after the slithering maniac as well. He reminded himself there was no creature more horrifying than Rose and charged into the snake, slashing its eye with his spear. His inexperience in battle became obvious faster than a roadrunner on steroids as he was flung away after his attack. The serpent came after him in return and crashed into a tree, giving him an opening. Or at least that was what his virgin ass thought before realizing he had been tricked. The snake reversed his plan to blindside it and bit into his left arm, scarring him as well. But fortunately for the first-time fighter, his knife was well placed to damage the monster as well, giving him a chance to escape the bite. He thought he had the advantage, but the snake threw a guess again card as the healer began to feel wobbly from poison. It then became a battle of Uno reverse when Usato healed himself from the poison, making the monster's attack useless. The pair finally decided to seal the battle as they made one last charge, which ended in Usato's victory thanks to the help of the Death Panda. The third-tier character had finally completed his first ever major quest and had a freakish blue Death Panda to celebrate it with. However, their jubilations were short-lived when the low-budget Loch Ness monster from hell decided to get back up from the dead and charge after the foolish weaklings who dared to challenge it. With what seemed to be his last few breaths, the dumb healer called out Rose for his demise, claiming the female gorilla with a wig was responsible for his predicament. In a surprising twist, he had hit his Sakura screaming for Naruto scene as Rose appeared and one-shotted the giant monster like she was Saitama. When her underling asked how she found him, she stated that the dark rabbit named Kukuru was her pet and it had been keeping tabs on him. She explained that she didn't intend to help him during the test. However, the involvement of the demonic snake, who had once escaped from Siglis, forced her hand. They then talked about how lucky he was to tame the little death bear, a skill many knights lacked. She decided that since he passed, she would carry him and the bear back to the kingdom. Everything seemed to be going right for the hideous healer, but after Rose reminded him a certain master of his looked like a gorilla in a wig, he realized just how cooked he was in the coming training. When they got to the cliff, Rose surprisingly began to open up to the non-purpose character. She explained that he would be her right-hand man because unlike the other two healing magic users, he had guts and couldn't stand to lose, a trait meant only for a leader. Meanwhile, in the demonic side of the isekai, the demon lord decided it was time to move. He called out his Gaiat general and told her to prepare for war. After Rose informed Usato trouble was bound to come, he instantly understood she meant a war was coming. As if that wasn't abrupt enough, he was also told his weak, skinny self would be part of the vanguard pushing forward with Rose, causing him to question his diabolical training. Back in Satan's backyard, Commander Dairy Tanks gave a status report to the hideous demon lord. She explained that all the warriors were ready for battle, so the demon king gave his blessings and granted her control over the mission. After she left the throne room, she took a deep breath, because she struggled to breathe in the room filled with the demon lord's awful stench. When the demon doctor saw her, He teased her for the gesture, informing her that he also had an issue with their king's putrid odor. She tried to deny the allegations, but the doctor wasn't buying any of her lies. She decided to ignore his rambling and walk away, causing the ugly doctor from hell to follow her. He made it known to her that his new experiment was a success because he had successfully spawned a more powerful Loch Ness monster. The Gaiot commander, Amila, was unmoved by his presentation, owing to the failure of the previous one, which ran from Siglis in battle. It was meant to be a giant snake, not a rat. When Professor Demon Goat promised her the new snake was stronger, Amila hoped he was right because she believed there were way more troublesome foes than Siglis. They both concurred, remembering what they identified as kidnappers on the battlefield who carried injured warriors for healing. The Gaiot commander particularly hated their leader, Rose, because she had a beef to settle with Amila's master. After the commander was ready to leave, the Hell Doctor reminded her she was meant to control the battlefield so she couldn't fight Rose. Amila informed him she knew, which was why she had a special knight in gloomy armor to take care of the gorilla maiden. Meanwhile in town, Usato was glad he had finally woken up on an actual bed for the first time in days, even though it was beside his roommate, Tong, who snored like a bear. Speaking of bears, he went on to feed the grand grizzly he had rescued and named Blurin. While he fed the fuzzy monster, Kukuru pulled up, annoying him. He felt betrayed after being outsmarted and tricked by the bunny, but when it snuggled with him, he foolishly trusted the bunny once more. While he continued his shenanigans with the animals, Rose appeared as well, looking at her right-hand man-to-be in disgust. She asked how lonely he must have felt to be stuck chatting only with animals. Subsequent to getting the banter out of the way, she informed him she had told the king they adopted the blue death bear, and he gave them their blessings, so it was fine if they kept it. However, the bear and Usato's smile were short-lived as Rose threatened to put the bear to work for every meal it ate. The monster was scared to death by the Pro-Max monster in a woman's skin, but after Usato asked what she meant by putting it to work, he got to know he was the intended target of her malice. His training had been upgraded, and he was now to carry the bear while running. Rose explained that it was to give him a real-life simulation of carrying a wounded ally. The healer tried to make a light joke off the bear, but when Rose hit him with a death stare, he immediately set off running. He was going at a steady pace till, suddenly, out of nowhere, two of the appalling rescue team members leapt at him. When he asked why they were fooling around, the brutes informed him that he was in a human dodgeball training to simulate attacks from demons, so they would be constantly chasing him. Following his escape from the first barrage of lunatics, he was attacked by a second wave an hour later, and this time, the psychos came with sticks and a stink bomb. He managed to evade them and then came across a barrage of logs, which he hopped over. When it was 4 hours into the diabolical training, he started to feel exhausted, but the obstacles weren't easing up. Once he finally got to an open plain, the non-purpose healer collapsed to the ground in exhaustion, wondering why he had less stamina than he usually did. Just then, Rose appeared completely out of nowhere and gave him his answer. He was exhausted because he was a cowardly weakling, and the fear he accumulated from the simulated battlefield caught up to him, leading to his exhaustion. When he asked how he could fix the newfound issue, the King Kong lady grabbed his face with healing magic and asked him to man up. She then ordered him to take a lap around town with Blurin on his back to keep him on his toes. Later that day, he did exactly as he was told and went to town with the bear. Although people were surprised by the monster at first, there was no commotion caused, thereby shocking him. After he stopped at a stall to check out a fruit for Blurin, he asked the lady why there was no ruckus over the bear. The grandma informed him they were already used to seeing the scary faces of the rescue team, so the bear was just a new ugly addition. The ugly healer thanked the lady for her explanation, and she gave him a weird-looking apple as a welcoming gift. He decided to check out the castle as well, but while he jogged on his way, he was stopped by a femboy in a lab coat who collapsed while trying to get his attention. After the dumb healer helped the mysterious guy back up, the blonde weirdo introduced himself to Usato as Orga, a senior in the rescue team. When the newbie expressed his confusion, Orga explained that because they were weaklings, Rose advised him and his sister Ururu to work at the town clinic, so they were unable to meet with the newbie till he came around. The newbie further asked how awful the war grounds could get, and the weak healer assured him it would be a gory sight. But as healers of the rescue team, they need to step up against the odds. After the weak healer convinced the unattractive one Rose wasn't the life-threatening beast from Satan's kitchen she made herself look like, the dialogue reject peacefully left the area to head for the castle. While Orga was back home, a short blonde shouted at him for going into town alone, even though he could barely handle a band of toddlers in a fight. The weak healer apologized to his sister Ururu for leaving her to go on an adventure, but informed her he met an interesting character he was sure she'd love to meet as well. Some minutes later, Usato arrived at the castle, where the palace guard allowed him and his gigantic monster in. Walking down a bit, he saw the aspiring knights in training who gazed at him, the creep in rags, with a giant monster on his back. Suzune was informed of his presence, so she left her training and met up with him to hang out. When she saw the bear, she reacted like she had just seen her favorite K-pop idol. She asked if she could pet the monster, and Usato rejected her request. Although she had been warned not to, Suzune tried to pet the bear regardless and got her hand slapped away. When she hoped for a second-time charm, the bear just straight up bit her arm. After Usato healed her, they talked about how life in their isekai was going. She informed him that Kazuki had gone on an expedition with Siglis to gain battle experience, reminding Usato of his first time, which seemed like a Suicide Squad mission. When he was done chatting with Suzune, Usato left the castle and returned to the healing base. That night, he spoke to Rose, as he had finally made up his mind on what he thought about her hellish training and strategy. He declared that his goal was to keep all his friends safe, so he had no issue staying in the vanguard as a healer, indirectly impressing Rose. After glazing him for the first time ever, she informed him that the king had requested he go to the castle once again. The next day, Rose led Usato to the castle, where she explained his new assignment. She informed him that he would be going on an expedition with Suzune to give her real battle experience, just like Kazuki the day before. When they got to the castle, Suzune was thrilled to see her ugly friend and the death bear. After a light chat, she introduced the unsightly healer to her aides, Aruku and Korin, who would be following them on the expedition. Before long, Rose stepped up and informed Suzune that Usato was a healer, not a dark magic user, so he could not bring entities back from the dead. She trusted the freak to be at least a decent level fighter and gave Usato no word of advice because she expected him to be experienced. When the wimp expressed confusion at her lack of words for him, the brute gorilla grunted at him, scaring him enough to understand what she meant. She told the warriors they could set off, then went back to the healer's base, leaving the group to fend with the wilderness themselves. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the castle, Kazuki practiced swinging a sword. After the cute princess saw him, she rushed to him faster than a geared cheetah. She complained that he was foolishly practicing after going on a stressful expedition. When the hero told her not to worry, Princess Innocent blushed, amazed at the willpower of her crush. Moments later, Usato and the group had set out on their training expedition. The freaky heroine explained to her ugly friend that they were headed to the darkness of Linger, a forest the non-purpose character wanted to forget. He looked at Blurin on his back and wondered if the death bear would feel nostalgic going back to his terrible home. Just then, Suzune must have felt his brainwaves, because she looked towards Blurin as well. She asked to pet the cub since it was asleep, but Usato refused, slapping her hands as she tried to touch it. After the unnecessary hand flirting between the bozos, the death bear woke up and the ugly healer dropped him so he could walk alone. When Suzune noticed it was walking dizzily, she offered to carry it herself. However, she regretted her stupid decision instantly, as the bear was heavier than Snorlax, causing her to crash to the ground. Subsequent to Usato relieving her of the bear's bone-crushing weight, Suzune continued the journey in shame, realizing she had lost more aura than a wasted high school teen on prom. Suddenly, the group mage Korin felt a weird presence. When the bandits realized they were caught, they revealed themselves and asked the funny-looking group to drop all their valuables. The foolish bandits must not have been familiar with how isekais work, because they were stunned to see one of their own low-diffed by Suzune's lightning magic. After the boss ignorantly asked the rest of the fools to charge, they were also equally folded like nameless Naruto ninjas against Madara in the Great War. In a surprising twist, a horde of wild monsters interrupted the fight, ending the one-sided beatdown and causing a split in the party. In the commotion, Usato attempted to save Suzune from a charging boar, and instead got blasted along with her. As if the terrible expedition wasn't nostalgic enough for him, Usato and Suzune fell into a flowing river, the exact same one Usato jumped into while running away from the death bears. He realized they were headed into a waterfall and asked Suzune to take a deep breath, hoping for the best. Some minutes later, Suzune regained consciousness and saw Usato laying down with his eyes closed. She rushed to him and promised to resuscitate him no matter the cost. but the healer stared at her blankly, wondering what she was waffling about. Upon noticing the ugly healer wasn't drowned, Suzune felt ashamed again from her lack of discretion. He was the one who saved her and dragged her to shore before resting because she wouldn't wake up. The pair looked at their equipment and leftover food to assess their situation and decided they would be fine for a night before heading home the next day. With their conclusion, Usato requested they sleep in a tree, but Suzune was reluctant to follow, causing the healer to assume she used to be a shut-in. He then changed the offer to a cave, which the freaky heroine had no issue with, so they had a change of clothes, then decided to switch the expedition to a camping trip, as the non-purpose character aimed to use the heroine as a multi-purpose tool. He started off by using her electricity to catch fish, then her fire starter skill to get the fish cooked in the cave. Now, when it was time for Usato to dry himself up, Suzune sat in a corner, but she didn't pass up the chance to take a look at the healer's physique, fawning over him like a K-pop fangirl. Just then, she noticed some weird eyes looking at them. When she went over to check, she noticed it was a troop of extra ugly monkeys going from tree to tree. Usato recognized them as poisonous monkey rats, and although he warned the isekai freak not to touch them, Suzune foolishly went ahead too, causing one to bite her into unconsciousness. Meanwhile, at the castle, word had gotten out that the unattractive healer and freaky fanatic had gone missing on the expeditions. While the others panicked, Rose informed them the pair would be all right, because she trusted her idiot unlike Siglis, who didn't trust his freaky heroine. Later that night, the pair sat at a campfire and told each other jokes before deciding it was time to get some sleep. Usato offered to stay up first, but when the freaky fanatic insisted she preferred to start off, he hit the haystack. A few minutes later, Suzune confirmed Usato was asleep. When the healer claimed he wasn't, she began to reach into her sensible side, asking him if he missed home and wondered about the people they left behind. Following Usato's explanation that he couldn't answer the question because it was too difficult, Suzune went into deep thought. She felt guilty that she didn't miss her home or family and needed the hideous healer to console her and make her feel like a better person, even though she was being a demon. When the fool told her it was fine, she smiled at him, complimenting him for foolishly appreciating her weeb nature. He blushed at her expression and then instantly slept back to save face, hoping for the morning to come. The next morning, the pair set on their journey back and traced landmarks, hoping to see Aruku and Korin. After walking for a while, they finally saw the death bear Blurin and their company for the expedition. Aruku had suffered an injury, so he needed healing from Usato, who was happy to help. When they confirmed the whole band was together, the group set off back to the kingdom of Linger. Upon getting back to Linger, the group was welcomed by the senile king, who expressed a lot of joy on their return. When he asked how Usato was able to handle the jungle so well, the repulsive healer lied that he had camping experience from his previous world. He knew that the king would be upset to learn Rose had sent him on a suicide mission in his short stay, and was equally aware Rose would kill him if he slipped up. Rose gave an affirming nod because he read the room right, and then the pair were sent out of the throne room so the adults could have an important conversation. While they walked away from the room, Usato asked Suzune if she noticed how tense the room was. When she asked whether he was referring to the minister's weird look as they were about to commence the meeting, he affirmed. They discussed the endless possibilities, and Usato ended the conversation by making a joke about the heroes being fired. The probability was laughed off because the pair knew the kingdom didn't have it in them to get better heroes. Suddenly, Mr. Perfect and Princess Innocent appeared, chasing after their friends. Kazuki expressed his worries about the pair getting lost on their expedition, with Celia supporting him by informing them he was ready to charge into the forest for them. After the pair laughed at his conviction, they decided to move their meeting somewhere else. They went to an open space and talked about their experiences in the different expeditions. When Usato mentioned how weird it was staying all night alone with a girl, Mr. Perfect couldn't understand what he meant. Usato instantly realized his friend wasn't a rotten egg like himself, and Suzune then advised Kazuki to keep away from the freaky fanatic to remain pure. Some moments later, the healer and heroine split from the group because they both had other places to be. Kazuki and Celia, who were left together, began to talk about Mr. Perfect's relationship with his friends and how unique it was. The moment Celia threw in a little green light, informing Kazuki she wanted to be that close, the hero was as dense as a teen rom-com MC and couldn't follow up on her invitation. Meanwhile, in the throne room, the big boys talked about the coming Demon King attack. Somewhere else, the bandits that had been arrested from Suzune's expedition were interrogated, and the kingdom understood that there were fewer monsters in the darkness of Linger. The only monsters the bandits saw were Usato's gruesome group and the stampede that parted the group, meaning the other beasts were hiding from something. So they deduced it was the Demon King's army and decided it was time to take action, as it was unlikely they'd be lucky like the previous time. The king ordered Siglis to ready the knights and demanded the minister in the room, Sergio, have a meeting with the others to determine how the news about the war would be spread. After he got the other two out of the room, the king decided to task Rose with a special assignment, which she promptly understood. Because she was a beast unlike any other, she would scout the Demon King's army and give the kingdom useful intel they could use. Before she could leave to start her assignment, the king had one more request for her. He got his lazy old body up and walked to Rose, pleading that she should consider joining the Night Force once more. Surprisingly, the gorilla in a woman's skin refused, claiming she was a member of the rescue team. When the king asked her if it was because of her trauma, green-haired Tarzan began to fume, claiming that it was nothing of the sort. She explained that she had gotten over the deaths of her old team and had her right eye taken as punishment for letting them die. She then went on to inform the king that she preferred the rescue team because she wanted subordinates who wouldn't die, unlike the wusses in the Night Force. The moment the king claimed it was impossible, she reminded him of her training cooked up in Satan's kitchen and how she had bred tough warriors. She knew Usato was the one to break the barrier and become the ultimate hero she wanted, a fighter with the will and intuition to pull off the wrong way to use healing magic. That night, our MC received a letter from Rose and wondered where she was. While opening the letter, he asked one of the ogres in his group where Rose went. The facially wrecked rescue team chef did not know as well and told Usato it was probably nothing serious. Somewhere in the darkness of Linger, it was, in fact, something serious, because Commander Chest Cannons had led her army closer to the kingdom. She had a minor altercation with her subordinate, the Dark Knight, who looked like a demon in a cheap medieval costume. They exchanged words until the Dark Knight sarcastically apologized for disrespecting his superior. The demon doctor, who witnessed their funny scuffle, walked up to the Gaiot commander and reminded her that getting disrespected was part of the job, especially because she was working with the idiot species called demons. Just then, one of the demon soldiers noticed a spy and informed the commander. Amila's response was nonchalant, because she believed they would get to the kingdom before the humans could react to the spy's information. However, she was promptly made aware that it was not just any spy who came after them, as a huge tree was chugged toward the demon progression, damaging some of their equipment and supplies. The commander and doctor looked in astonishment, wondering what beast could haul a tree that large and throw it from such a distance. After seeing the gorilla build an oddly green hair, Amila recognized the monster Rose and realized it was too late. Rose evacuated the scene faster than a rabbit ambushed by a tortoise and praised herself for giving the kingdom more days to prepare for the demon troops. The next day, our boy went into the city using a map Rose had given him. It happens that the letter he received the night before was an order to deliver a package to someone else using that same map. While walking around, the people were more interested in Usato even though he was not running around like a headless chicken or carrying a death bear. He realized the people found him weird since he was wearing the rescue team's rags and acting normal. He then had a light chat with the fruit seller from his previous run in town, while a mysterious young girl with gold hair watched from a hidden part of the shop. Some minutes later, our MC arrived at his destination, where he was entertained by a 10/10 girl. After seeing the yellow rag the ugly healer wore, Ururu instantly picked out who he was and welcomed him. When he tried to introduce himself, she requested that he shouldn't because she wanted to remember his name. She struggled to remember what his name was, reminding her that he was an NPC. He felt ashamed and told her it was Usato to speed up the meeting. Before she could yap again, he asked for her brother Orga, and she informed him that he was working on a patient. To feed his ugly eyes, Usato asked if he could see, and the pair peeked at the weak healer treating his patient. The weak healer applied his magic on the patient like a voodoo charm caster, silently glowing his green, eerie magic. The appalling healer looked in disbelief, wondering why Orga's magic looked stronger than his. When the patient was healed, Orga asked the kid to play more carefully and sent him out with his mum. A few minutes later, the weak healer had time for the unappealing healer and his sister. He received the letter Usato was asked to deliver and read it, while the other two healers chatted. At the point when Usato mentioned the other two training under Rose, Orga simultaneously paused his letter out of shock. Ururu explained that she and her brother were awful at Rose's training drills, which was why they were withdrawn from the system. They were complete physical wrecks who could not run half the distance Usato ran in a day, even if they had a week. Just then, the group were interrupted by a random civilian who informed them of an accident. His friend was fixing a roof and crashed down onto two other people, and no one around could take them to the hospital. The healing group ran to the scene and saw the injured men lying on the ground, while the townspeople played their roles as non-purpose characters, doing nothing. Subsequent to Orga rushing to the aid of the first man and Ururu to the second, Usato behaved just like the filler character he was and did nothing. When his 2 brain cells sent a signal that he was a healer as well, he hurried to help the last guy and joined the healers in resolving the accident. After the group saved the injured men, they were applauded by the other dialogue loop victims for their quick response. While they walked back to the clinic, Orga complimented the level 1 forever healer, who questioned if he did well. Upon getting back to the clinic, Usato decided it was time to bounce and return to his ogre-infested home. Minutes after Usato left, the weak healer informed his sister of the war that was coming. It turned out that Rose had requested their presence using the letter Usato brought, so they would be extremely busy in the coming days. Meanwhile, Usato was walking along the street after buying fruits from the woman he had met before. Out of nowhere, the mysterious girl who had been stalking him earlier grabbed his hands. She was a fox lady, and she began to mumble weirdly in words our one brain cell hero could not understand. Suddenly, her eyes began to glow gold, and she sent Usato into a trance like Doctor Strange after meeting the Ancient One. He was spun into a vision of the future where his friends, the heroes, had been killed, and the humans lost the war to a knight in gloomy armor. The moment he regained consciousness from the vision, the fox girl had run away, leaving Usato speechless. The healer ran around looking for the girl who laced him with the awful vision. Unknown to him, the fox girl had already hidden in a building and watched as he scurried around like a lost sheep looking for her. Some minutes later, Usato had searched all the way to the palace gate. While he disturbed a guard on duty with his questions, the innocent knight suddenly reacted like he saw a ghost in a vampire cosplay. He had seen a monster, but not one that was after his soul or blood, fortunately for him. Following the guard's departure, Rose asked why Usato was disturbing the innocent man with his unappealing looks, and the young healer informed her of the girl with bunny ears. Rose explained that she had heard of the girl, a beastkin who managed to get through the horrible darkness of Linger all alone at 12 without getting kidnapped by dim-witted humans or butchered by a monster. In order to get more information, Usato's inquired further, and Rose made it known to him that beastkins of her kind were extremely valuable because they were beautiful. Unlike the women in their world who weren't hit with an ugly stick, instead the whole tree fell on them. She further explained that there was also their possession of unique magic, which made them more special for bandits and kidnappers. Subsequent to hearing magic, the healer asked about visions and future sight, which the female brute said she had no idea of. The only thing she did know about something like that was that some of the unique monsters were called Oracles of Time, giving Usato an idea of what he was searching for. Before long, the pair split up as Rose went to the castle while Usato went home. At the castle, the king apologized to Rose for sending her on a terrible mission. The disastrous lady told the king it was no issue because she had arrived with a mission report. Upon hearing the demons were building a bridge to cross over into their territory, the senile king almost fell over to meet his ancestors, but Rose reassured him she had destroyed it, along with some of their supplies, giving them a few more days to recalculate. When Rose left, the king informed his minister it was time to let the people know what was happening. He also sent for the heroes, as it was their time to shine in the kingdom's moment of need. Some moments later, the heroes approached the throne room when they came across Celia, waiting to welcome them. The tension between Kazuki and the princess's innocent reaction made it clear she wasn't as pure as she seemed, and Kazuki was not as good on a bed as he was in the battlefield. Later that night, Usato had an uncomfortable night trying to sleep. He remembered the horrible vision and the mumbles from the fox girl, which made it seem like he was the only one who could change the future. While he paced around in confusion, the healer saw a weird light from outside. When he checked the window, he noticed Kazuki outside, eager to have a meeting about something important. Later on, the healer joined Mr. Perfect for a chat under the stars. They talked about how they had adapted to the isekai and how weird both their journeys had been. When Kazuki felt comfortable enough, he admitted that he visited because he was feeling scared of the coming war. Mr. Perfect was shook by the idea of fighting against monsters and defending the city, so he ran away from the castle after he was informed of his duties. He remembered the expedition and how easy it seemed, but when it was put in the perspective of a war, he realized he was as useful as a background character in Chainsaw Man. Seeing his dilemma, Usato comforted Mr. Perfect by glazing him. He reminded Kazuki that he was now a hero and the coolest guy he knew. Kazuki was surprised his friend was composed, so he asked what the small man thought about the war. Usato explained that he was dedicated to getting to the front lines and fighting the war, but Mr. Perfect reminded him he was a slip-up who shouldn't even have been isekai'd. Although he was just reminded how unwanted he was, Usato was unwavering, declaring that he would survive the war alongside Kazuki and win. Fortunately, Usato's motivational speech struck a vein because Mr. Perfect realized just how corny and lame he sounded that night. He steeled his resolve as well and prepared his mind for war, thanking Usato for reminding him he was a hero. Then he left. But before the healer could go back into the house as well, he was stopped by the freaky heroine who overheard their cringe conversation. Suzune had noticed how gloomy Mr. Perfect looked, so she followed him to the healer's base, where she overheard their conversation. She asked her friend if he was fine with the heroes joining the war, and Usato informed her he was against it. He didn't want his friends to die like the vision showed him, but he didn't have a choice, so he would work to keep the useless, so-called heroes from dying. The next day, the senile king addressed the knights he had gathered in his courtyard, informing them of the coming war. He manifested his inner Eren and thought up the most motivational speech he had ever given in his life to the army. He reminded the warriors they had fended off the Demon King's army before, so doing it again should be a piece of cake. He pointed at the heroes, then informed his soldiers they would have Mr. Perfect and the freaky heroine by their side. After hearing King Eren speak, the soldiers and heroes were more motivated than Amazonian warriors, ready to charge into battle. Moments later, Princess Celia had a visitor in her room. Kazuki had come to apologize for the tension between them and promise he would make it back from the war alive. He assured her a proper clapping of her cheeks, causing her to blush before he set off to battle. At the healer's base, Ururu came across Blurin for the first time ever and called it the cutest thing she had seen in her life. When she tried to pet the death bear, it continuously slapped her hands till she almost felt numb. She assumed the bear was simply being shy, but after Kukuru appeared, it refused to allow her to pet it as well, making it obvious she was awful with animals. At the other side of the compound, the weak healer bit the dust with the packages he was carrying, forcing Usato to rush over. After the loading screen filler helped Orba up, the weak healer apologized for the stress he and his sister caused Usato. Just then, Tong appeared, informing Usato the tomboy wanted to see him. When Usato got to her office, he saw Rose Aura farming behind a box, waiting for him to come. She reminded him of his role in the vanguard. However, there would be a twist. The pair would not go forward till later on in the battle because they would initially stay at the back with Ururu and Orga to heal the wounded brought back by the ogre squad. Once he claimed to understand her, she explained that he also needed to add brains to his healing to avoid being a liability on the battlefield. By the time she was done with her words of advice, she passed him the box she was holding, and Usato opened it. For the first time in the isekai, Usato would no longer wear rags, as he was given a hand-me-down healer's uniform to make him stand out in the war zone. He thanked her for the gift, leading to an emotional moment where she grabbed his face like she was leaning in for a kiss. It was not what it looked like, but she passed her point across to Usato that he mustn't die. After wrapping up the meeting with Rose, Usato steeled his resolve again to be useful in the coming battle. The next day, the group set out to battle in their carriage, following the lead of the knights. Ururu was having first war jitters, thinking about what could happen in the battle. At the front of the carriage, Usato asked Rose what the demons were like. She explained that they were just more ugly humans with mountain goat horns and a tan. When she asked if her right-hand man was scared, Usato denied it, claiming the rescue team looked scarier and was probably stronger. Rose liked his response and asked how an unwanted stowaway like him became so tough. He reminded her she had put him through hellish training, causing Rose to laugh. While she was feeling cheerful, she remembered her old team, which was the last time she went into a war. Some years before, the king called a meeting between all the knights of the order. They had intel that demons were sneaking into their territory, so the senile old man requested Rose, a leading knight at the time, to look into it. She had both eyes working, and she looked less like a gorilla than she did when she met Usato. After the king dismissed the knights, Rose began wondering how she could scout the demons, but her thoughts were interrupted by a midget who would not stop making noise by her side. When Rose had enough, she resounded the short girl's head with a knock, silencing the noisemaker. The little lady's name was Aul, and she was the second in command of Rose's squad. She complained that her captain's knock was too powerful because it was backed by the strength of a gorilla, leading to another knock from Rose, which almost divorced her head in 2 equal parts. Some moments later, the pair headed over to their base, where they met the other members of Rose's group. When they asked why their deputy commander looked gloomy, Rose butted in, explaining that she would be drilling the group because they were slackers. The other squad members instantly knew all had yapped her way into getting them in trouble and immediately hounded her. She attempted to defend herself by claiming they needed it, but the squad members were having none of her silly excuses. Rose's old squad was actually a bunch of dumb humans in contrast to her new squad, which was a group of mindless ogres. The next day, the king called for a meeting with the Overpowered lady and informed her that his intel reported the presence of multiple demons hunting in their territory. The old man requested she investigate the scene with her group, and Rose agreed in a flash. That night, Rose informed her team of her mission, causing some minor mumbles and reluctance from the members. Nevertheless, they immediately changed their tunes after hearing Rose would be joining them in battle. They jubilated, talking about how they had nothing to worry about if Rose decided to heal them. They then prepared to set out in the morning as Rose gave her team a pep talk on how the mission was a simple recon task. The next day, the group set out in their armor and went through the forest of Linger. When it was dark, they set up camp and followed the instructions of All, the midget who also happened to be their deputy commander. She instructed them to take turns sleeping and watching the fire, and the warriors agreed to her basic plan. Some minutes later, while Rose was on fire watch, she told All she was aware the midget was not sleeping. When the deputy got up, she asked why Rose picked her over the others to be second in command. Rose laughed at her question and joked that she just felt like punishing the dwarf in her squad. After throwing in her joke, Rose became serious and told All that it was a job for someone, and she decided to choose the midget. It became a long conversation of Rose convincing All she deserved it, while All struggled to understand her arguments. At a point, the pair just let go of the conversation and decided to have a flashback on when they met. Upon seeing the monster named Rose for the first time, the midget wanted nothing to do with her at all, yet she was forced to battle the monster and was utterly humiliated in the fight. All laughed after remembering the story and appreciated Rose as a commander over a rival. When the King Kong lady heard her corny appreciation speech, she hit her deputy commander down with healing magic, then walked up to her to remind her they were in enemy territory. She told All she was good enough to be deputy commander, and the midget teared up in happiness. While leaving the scene, Rose called out the other members who were eavesdropping on their touching conversation. The group laughed at All and teased her for doubting herself before reassuring her they were completely behind her, even though she was almost Mojo Jojo's height. She had been successfully rage-baited, so she chased her team around the camp, asking them to take it back. The next day, the group continued their recon and found out the king's intel was accurate. Some demons were on their turf, capturing monsters secretly and putting them in cages. Rose and the group preferred to stay out of sight and hidden from the demon's view, but the big bad boss in the group foiled their plan by sensing and calling them out. Rose warned her team to be careful before stepping forward to interrogate the trespassing beast. She asked what the demon wanted, but the stupid beast itself was unaware, telling Rose it was just following orders. At the point where Rose attempted to cut the long talk short and propose a peaceful retreat for the demons, the bad boss refused, declaring that Rose and her group must die for seeing them. The challenge was music to Rose's ears as she instructed her group to charge after the demons, while the bad boss instructed his army to get rid of the pesky humans. In the process of moving to attack the powerful demon, the commander put Owl in charge of eliminating the NPC demons so she could focus on booting out the bad boss. By the time Rose hit the demon with his own wind magic, the creature was surprised a random human could keep up with him and actually land a hit. He tried to compliment the female gorilla, but she was not in the mood to chat with his ugly face, so she charged forward to land another attack. After the demon spammed multiple wind attacks that simply felled trees, Rose showed why there were rumors of her being a gorilla-beast hybrid. She grabbed entire trees with her arm and threw them towards the demon like she was the beast titan flinging random stuff at the Great Wall in Attack on Titan. She thought she had hit a perfect bullseye on the creep with her sixth fling, but the monster charged up like a Dragon Ball character and destroyed the tree that landed on him with his wind magic. The fierce battle continued as the monster attempted to cover Rose in slicing wind magic, but Rose easily escaped his trap by healing herself and walking through it, surprising the demon once again. He had finally seen the peak of humanity, a woman with a gorilla build, so he decided to take it to the next step. He introduced himself to Rose as Nero and promised to give her an honorable death for being so strong. He then summoned a sword that looked like it was born during a glitch in the Matrix and told the Shikong it was time to say goodbye. Rose called his talk unicorn Fable, then charged at the demon, who charged back with his design error sword. On the other side of the battlefield, the clash raged on, but the humans had an edge over the stinky demons. One of Rose's underlings could manipulate demons into thinking their whiners were small, so the warriors easily lost motivation. Rose was also putting on a pounding show for Nero, who was completely outmaneuvered by the tomboy. After realizing he was cooked, the bad boss decided to yap so he could catch his breath. He informed the Knight Commander that the humans were significantly weaker because they had no great heroes among them. When Rose asked how that influenced the demons, Nero regained his strength and declared that demons were no longer scared of humankind as they were before, so a new demon king would rise. Rose could barely understand anything the demon said because it sounded like insignificant yap, but when he started to charge up like Toph, the destroyer god in a tournament of power, she knew he had finally let go of all his training wheels. While he glowed with his disgusting red aura, the gorilla lady was frozen in disbelief as she could feel the change in the battle tide. One of her underlings successfully pierced through a screen filler demon, yet the demon was unfazed by the fact that it was bound to die. The demon boss uttered the final part of his sappy dialogue, which was that they were tools of the Demon King, and Rose promptly knew what was up. She rushed towards her confused comrade but was intercepted by attacks from Nero. Before anyone else could react, the demon grabbed its low-budget scythe and slashed through the blonde warrior, splashing her goo all over her teammate who was invested in his own battle. After it became clear that one of theirs had died, the battle turned haywire with emotions due to the pain the humans felt. Before long, other members of Rose's team began to drop like flies along with the demons. All couldn't regain control of the battlefield, and while Rose was distracted, Nero Aura farmed with his symmetry dropout sword, which seemed to give the demons the idea to eliminate themselves along with the humans. He informed Rose that it was his master plan, and she instantly began to crash out, charging towards the demon without any tactic. When the demon noticed her lapse in concentration, he took an eye, making the gorilla lady look like Pirate Hook. The demon was at the peak of its powers, as he had rage-baited the Knight Commander and scarred her, making her unable to aid her comrades who needed healing. He hit her with another attack, rendering her unable to move as swiftly as she did before, and because she had lost an eye, her sense of distance was completely bonkers. She began to fade just like Rengoku after fighting Akaza, and Nero charged in to capitalize and claim his victory. However, when he fired his final attack, Owl, who had been a complete ghost in the battle, swooped in to take the hit, sacrificing herself for her captain. The instant Rose took a look at her deceased squad, she remembered the promises they had made to each other and how useless she had been as a commander in the battle. The moment the demon attempted to eliminate her once again, she went from pirate gorilla to adult gone, filling herself with resentment and hate. She called Nero a chronic yapper, grabbed his sword midair, then threw him a nasty punch, which dropped him to his knees. She then continuously punched him till he was blasted away, forcing him to attempt a retreat. But before he could run, she ensnared him and imitated that one Hulk and Loki scene, smashing him from ear to ear like the worthless piece of trash he was. She proceeded to chug him from place to place before landing a clean lunge to his stomach, which blasted him onto a tree. Before he could fall, she pinned him down with his own sword out of rage and prepared to give him another round of whooping. The injuries she had suffered began to kick in, slowing her momentum, and in that brief period, a younger female demon came out from hiding to help Nero escape. It was the soon-to-be Gaiat commander before she developed her cannons. When the enraged knight saw the little demon helping her master, she lost her will to fight, seeing all in the little girl. The demon successfully escaped, and Rose could do nothing about it because she was a weak-hearted Shikong, so she dragged her injured body over to Owl's side, hoping she could help her youngin. By the time Rose got back, Owl managed to get a few words out of her system. She teased Rose for not being the heartless gorilla the team thought she was, and told Rose not to beat herself up because she had recruited complete weaklings into her team. Before Rose could tell her to take it back, the midget had already joined the other members in Valhalla, leaving Rose in disbelief and despair. The next day, Rose returned to the castle after healing and gave the king a mission report. She informed him about the new coming of the Demon King and how they had to be prepared for it. When she was done reporting to the king, she requested she be relieved of her night duties, and the senile old man humbly accepted, understanding her pains. While she walked home, she was approached by an old couple with gold hair. They introduced themselves as the parents of one of her old subordinates who had died, and apologized for whatever trouble he may have caused the ex-commander. Upon hearing them speak, Rose was surprised she wasn't the one who needed to apologize for losing their son. They explained that she brought home his corpse, and that he died serving the kingdom, so they were proud parents. That experience showed the tomboy a whole new dimension on the issue, leading to her retirement. She spent the next month rotting at home till Siglis popped up at her doorstep one day. He asked whether she was aware the king visited her, and Rose informed him she had personally entertained the king well when he came. After hearing her speak, Siglis marched up to her and grabbed her by the collar, asking why she was being a hobo just because of a little loss. The ex-commander calmed him down, and the knight apologized, understanding he had been rash. He inquired about the mysterious injuries she incurred, and she explained that they were healing now that the curse was losing its hold. When he asked why she refused to heal her right eye to stop looking like a sea villain, the scene went into a complete halt. After the general left, she remembered telling him that she wouldn't heal her eye as a reminder of her failure. She continued lazing around the house, feeling like a sorry nobody for the next few days, till one day she remembered the fun times she had with her old team. Suddenly, a hallucinated version of Owl appeared, telling Rose to stop being a shut-in, as it wasn't what she was known for. The figure reminded her how much fun it was being in a team, and reminded her that the warriors only died because they admired her and believed she would be the one to keep humanity safe. Walmart All then transformed into a hallucination of her old team, giving the ex-commander the kick in the gear she knew she needed to become a main character once more. She instantly regained all her lost aura by tearing off the bandage covering her wounded eye, and began planning to get back into the battlefield in a more useful way. She would form a healing unit with 2 ground healers and some ogre-like lackeys who would carry wounded soldiers around to their base. The final piece of her plan would be a healer just like her, one who was rough, tough, and ready to get his hands dirty to heal soldiers on the spot and take down demons as well. That piece was our boy, the unwanted stowaway from the summoning ritual, who was ready to use magic the wrong way. After wrapping up her story, Rose slammed Usato in the stomach to make herself feel better. While he healed himself from both the physical and emotional shock, she threw him another banger by informing him he was an important piece in the war, a compliment the healer didn't expect from his boss. With the pair in a happy mood, they were prepared to head into battle and defeat the demon scum invading their lands. Meanwhile, at the demon camp, the bridge was finally fixed and ready for them to cross. The Gaiot commander asked her soldiers to march on and called out the Dark Knight to prepare to move forward as well. Feeling like the honored one, the warrior in gloomy armor was a very stubborn soldier, so it complained about being bossed by a female commander just because her balloons were a bit bigger than his psycho-demonic ex. Nonetheless, upon hearing the possible fun it could have with the humans in the war, the Dark Knight set forth as well, ready to unleash carnage in the human world. The next day, the human army had set camp in the grasslands, ready to ambush the demons if they came through. While the rescue ogres slept, the MC got up early to take a breather and observe the scope of the soon-to-be battlefield. Some moments later, he was approached by Suzune, who wanted to flex her new armor in front of her friend like she was a child. She flexed how it was fit to assist her lightning magic and movement, reminding her of a cactus for some reason she couldn't explain. When the protagonist asked why she thought of something as random as a cactus, she informed him that she used to be a cactus farmer because it soothed her heart. The healer could barely understand his friend, and it didn't help that she decided to be more confusing by requesting he soothed her heart in place of her old cactus farm. After he rejected her offer, Suzune began to chase after him, calling him a tsundere. It became very evident the freaky fanatic wanted to go into funny business with Usato, forcing him to scream out for help from Mr. Perfect. Fortunately for him, Kazuki heard his screams and dragged Suzune away. When she attempted to fight back, he informed her Siglis was searching for them to pass on battle strategies, so the cactus farmer calmed down and left on her own, waving goodbye to Usato because they would continue their shenanigans later. The healer shivered in fear of what was to come, but he had calmed down from his pre-war jitters. Some minutes later, Siglis began his war speech and addressed the human army. He informed them the mages would open up the battle with a large preemptive strike. Then the heroes and knights would charge in to clear a way to the commander. If possible, he would prefer they turned the enemy commander into a headless Dullahan to end the war as swiftly as possible. The heroes informed the knight they understood the assignment and headed to their battle stations to commence the attack. While they waited for the demons to come, the heroes teased each other about who was more frightened by the battle than the other. When Kazuki reminded the heroine that she was flirting with the unappealing healer simply out of fear, Suzune admitted she had lost the round of words. but she wouldn't let him beat her on the battlefield. After Mr. Perfect told the freaky heroine she was a different ballgame than before in the student council, the cactus farmer accepted her changes, explaining that even Usato had accepted her since she was no longer a stuck-up council president. Suddenly, the heroes began to feel the aura of the coming demon army. The instant they saw the demons marching towards them, the humans readied their magical assault, then fired at the coming warriors to give themselves an advantage. Little did they know, they had been fooled by the most basic of parlor tricks. When the battle looked too easy, a scout pointed out that they were firing at illusions and the demons were heading towards them from their left flank, meaning the battle was still on leveled ground. The heroes believed it was their time to shine as they charged towards the left flank, starting the great battle that had been coming. Meanwhile, in the healing camp of the human sector, Rose began to dish out her own instructions as well. She asked the facially unfortunate ogres in black to head into the battlefield, to bring whatever injured soldiers they could to the healing camp. She then faced the weak healers in gray and ordered them to remain in the tents, where they would heal whatever victims the ogre squad brought back. The weaklings would be under the protection of Aruku, who had finally been upgraded from 6th class NPC knight to a 3rd class knight. And finally, she turned to our overpriced gynophobic male and reminded him of their plan, which was to remain in the tents for the first few minutes of the war, then head out when it was hectic enough. Usato began to worry if the heroes were fine, so Ururu reminded him to prioritize himself first, because he would be headed out next. Just then, one of the ogre squad members brought the first victim, shocking the war virgins. Upon seeing their reaction, Rose reminded them it was war, so they had to be mentally prepared for that. More injured knights came, and the group immediately set to healing. When Usato started with his patient, he began to fumble with his hands like he was about to write a horrific exam his life depended on. However, after remembering the life of a warrior was at stake, he locked in and began to heal. While healing, the wounded soldier informed him she was injured by a large snake. Usato immediately remembered the slithering mess he had defeated in the darkness of Linger and assumed the terrifying creature had a friend who had come as its replacement. On the battlefield, the visual error monster continued to cause extra trouble for the human army, wrecking them one after the other without remorse. Upon seeing how frightened and lost the human soldiers looked, the knight in gloomy armor wondered why he was brought to the battlefield in the first place, because the battle looked won without his help. Suddenly, a random human knight appeared out of nowhere and passed his sword through her chest from behind, instantly making her eat her words. Or so it seemed, till she made me eat my own words by magically reversing the damage to the soldier before healing herself. The knight was astonished as he crashed down and thought it was best to tell others about the horror show Dark Knight. By the time the Dark Knight attempted to finish him off, she was halted in her tracks by what looked like a balloon meant for a water balloon fight in a creek playground. Before she could realize what was going on, the knight she wounded had disappeared, reminding her of Commander Guyot's warning about kidnappers on the battlefield. She laughed in amusement and understood there was more fun to be had in the battle, so she went after a streak of lightning magic she thought would come with a fun fight. Finally, at the healing camp, it was time for the gorilla lady and her tutorial skipper sidekick to head into the battlefield. She confirmed Usato was ready, then gave the weak healers more instructions on how to properly handle the insane workload. She then reminded Aruku he was now on the big screen, so he had to protect the healers diligently to prevent his re-entitlement or coronation as a 6th-tier knight once again. After getting all her points through, the ex-commander launched into the battle with her right-hand man while explaining how their flow would be. She informed him their duty was to heal on-site and Aura Farm, but they would have to put a lot into it because allegedly a Dark Knight on the Demon Squad was out Aura farming as well. Upon hearing Dark Knight, Usato remembered his horrible vision and hoped it wasn't coming to that. He stopped to get his heart out of his mouth, so Rose halted as well and decided to give him another word of advice. She confirmed he was too much of a wimp to kill an opposition army member and teased him for remaining true to the "I won't kill anyone because I'm a healer" gimmick. She then grabbed his head and rubbed it like he was a pet dog to tell him of a secret non-killing move she had. After hearing Rose, the healer smiled, thinking the move was designed just for him. He thanked the tomboy for her help, then set into battle once more with his renewed will intact. He saw multiple dead bodies but didn't let them faze him because he knew what was up. And after seeing a soon-to-be eliminated soldier crawling on the battlefield, he grabbed the weakling and ran. While healing the knight, he was yet attacked by another demon soldier. However, the warrior couldn't land a hit due to Usato's well-bred retreating skills. Meanwhile, Rose was causing some trouble of her own, as she jumped from place to place carrying wounded soldiers, healing them, then putting on a show for the useless demons who couldn't believe their eyes. On another side of the battlefield, the heroes were receiving their own praise as well, with Suzune putting on a lightning show that fired positive reviews out of the demons. When the captain of the troop she saved thanked her, she directed him to the healing sector, where they would aid the wounded. After the soldiers left, Suzune looked at the victims of her ferocious attack and began to feel sympathy for the profile picture materials for horror games. But when Kazuki reassured her they could end the horrid scenes if they got to the enemy commander, she locked in and got her head back in the game. Just then, the knight in shady armor appeared. Pleased he had finally met the heroes there was so much buzz about. Upon seeing the monster among monsters, the heroes understood it was bad news, but a group of dialogue loop victims who wanted to farm glory for themselves charged at the monster against Suzune's will and pierced it with their weapons. They thought they had done something, and the heroes were shocked the beast allowed the non-purpose characters to pierce into her that easily. However, the Dark Warrior simply repelled them and reversed the damage, making it clear how much it didn't rate the small fries. Kazuki was shocked by the mysterious spell the monster used, so he charged up his light magic. Luckily for him, he had the freaky heroine to bump into his attack, causing it to slightly graze the demon's armor on its shoulder. When Mr. Perfect asked why Suzune stopped his attack, she called him Dr. Stupid and pointed out how obvious it was that she was reflecting attacks. Just then, the grazed armor attack was reversed to Kazuki, giving him a clear understanding of what Suzune meant, since he was a visual learner. They analyzed the armor and wondered what they could do to get at the monster. On another side of the battlefield, our boy was struck by his vision once again, and it began to ruin his mind. While he was struck with the migraine that wouldn't let him go, he was attacked by demons, hoping to capitalize off his lapse in concentration. Fortunately for him, he was saved by one of the soldiers he had helped before, keeping him alive. He got the location of the heroes from the soldier, then ran forward, hoping he could get to them before they were laid waste to by the Dark Knight. Meanwhile, on the front lines, Suzune had thought up what she believed to be an A-lister plan that would help her bypass the demon's unbeatable defense. She got help from Mr. Perfect by convincing him they would get healed if they failed. They charged forward and launched an attack to the ground, obstructing the Dark Knight's sight and giving them openings to make little incursions around the knight's armor. Sadly, it was futile as their attacks were reflected, except one. It was an attack on the back, so the freaky heroine devised a plan to give the demon the backshots it deserved. She charged up her lightning like a Dragon Ball character and began to zoom around at the speed of lightning to stay out of the monster's sight. Mr. Perfect, on the other hand, became a great nightlight, a plan that seemed unimpressive to the demon because it looked like a flashy light show intended to blind him. However, for the second time, the demon would eat his own words as Suzune snuck behind it and pierced through its armor from the back, rendering it unable to talk and giving Kazuki an opening to strike from the front, eliminating it once and for all. Unfortunately for the heroes, I will be eating my own words again because it was a well-executed trap from the knight aimed at deceiving them into pulling that cool attack. The monster reversed both their attacks, knocking out the heroes as it aura-farmed and explained his ability wasn't passive, so he tricked them into trying a backshot attack. With her attack reversed, Suzune began to see the lights fading, causing her to utter out "Usato" as her last words in desperation for help from her healer friend. After getting decimated by the wrath of the ruthless knight in shady armor, Suzune remembered the most special night of her life. She had finished her student council duties late at night along with Kazuki, so they decided to go home together. It was a rainy day, and Kazuki forgot his bag. Hence, she went downstairs alone, which was when it happened. She met a student who looked like a visual disaster piece and happened to click with her. That one interaction led to her fun-filled isekai, where she was no longer the unapproachable Suzune, but a freaky heroine. When the knights saw the dying heroes, they screamed out in disbelief. For the demons, the Dark Knight had secured their victory with those eliminations, so they began to jubilate. It was finally time for the warrior in gloomy armor to end the hero's adventure, but before he could land his strike, a Superman punch popped out of thin air and landed on the demon's ugly face. Usato had finally gotten his main character moment, and he made the most of it. He thought he hadn't made it to the heroes on time, yet Kazuki let out a weak cough, giving him a glimpse of hope. He rushed to his friends and started their healing, making sure that his horrible vision wouldn't come to pass. When Suzune regained consciousness, she was pleased to see the fixer still healing her and thanked him for saving her life. On the other side, the Dark Knight was actually a lady, and she was extremely furious that she had been cheap-shotted by the unappealing healer. She charged up like a raging bull and chased after Usato, who noticed her absurd movements and picked up the heroes before running away. On his path was a group of demons aiming to stop him, but he easily easily jumped over them, giving the human knights a chance to block them as well. While Usato ran, he had a conversation with the heroine. He informed her that Kazuki would wake up soon since his major wounds had been healed. She explained to him likewise that he had done the impossible by harming the Dark Knight and getting away with it. Suddenly, the Dark Knight threw her sword like a javelin at the retreating kidnapper, forcing him to halt. He lamented that her reflection was a cheat in the Matrix that shouldn't be allowed, but Suzune assured him that he'd be fine since he got away with punching her. After Suzune assured him he could win, the repugnant healer dropped the heroes and decided to square up with the annoyed knight. He coated himself in healing magic and charged at the monster, dodging armor attacks that were sent at him on the way. He deflected attacks easily and maneuvered his way to the Dark Knight. He landed a sucker punch with his right hand, then offered a main dish strong hook with his left hand, knocking the knight off her feet and filling her with even more rage than before. She began to spam more attacks from her armor, which Usato easily parried away, surprising Suzune, who was watching the epic fight. Around that time, Kazuki finally woke up from his nap and wondered why he wasn't in Isekai Valhalla. Suzune pointed to Usato handling the Dark Knight with ease, and it quickly became clear to Mr. Perfect what had happened. The healer was struck with an attack from the monster knight, yet it had no effect, even though it pierced through his glove. Usato could also easily attack the knight without worrying about a redirection. That was when it suddenly clicked to the heroes that Usato was coating himself in healing magic while fighting. Although it should have been healing his opponent, the weight of the force was too strong, meaning our boy was just a trashy healer. They watched their friend strut his pose as he had mastered the art of the wrong way to use healing magic. When the knight in gloomy armor was done with the healer's games, she began to crash out and throw a fit. She manipulated her sword size like she was Lionel from Thundercats and made it big enough to swipe out at least 500 soldiers at a go. The heroes warned Usato that she might have another magic trick up her sleeve, but the unappealing healer was still in his main character flow, so he told them not to worry. The forces of good and evil clashed with each other, creating a massive wave impact. However, when the lights were shining brightest and the fate of the Great Race War was hanging on the lines, our MC claimed the win as he smashed through the Thunder Sword and struck a massive hit to the demon's abdomen to defeat the Dark Knight. Before long, the warrior in gloomy armor was tied up like the victim she was, and Dr. Fixer continued to heal wounded soldiers in the area due to the retreating demons, who saw their strongest fall. Some of the knights began to glaze Usato for his work in the battle. They praised him for saving the heroes and defeating the Dark Knight, which forced other demons to run out of fear. When the glazing fighters dispersed, Suzune decided to praise her friend as well, teasing him for doubting himself before the battle started. After she asked how he thought of using healing magic as a boxing glove, Usato remembered Rose's words earlier in the day. She advised him to use healing magic to punch people since he didn't want to kill anyone, so it would simply be an attack that knocked the victims unconscious. While he continued to yap about his innovation, the freaky heroine felt awkward, thinking about how she was as useless as a background character in the deciding battle. Just then, Kazuki came back with a chance for redemption. He informed her the humongous serpent had reached the front lines, so the human forces needed their help. Before Dr. Fixer could follow the heroes, he was grabbed by Rose, who wanted to confirm the rumors of the heroics herself. She told him their duty on the battlefield was done, and they would be heading back to the healing camp, so Usato bid the heroes goodbye and ran back with his master. Meanwhile, the demon base was just informed they had lost their strongest warrior on the battlefield. Commander Gyat was completely devastated by the news and could barely understand what her informant told her. Upon asking whether the Dark Knight lost to the heroes, she was promptly put on high alert after finding out her best fighter was eliminated by a rescue team member who wasn't Rose. She weighed her losses, then informed the doctor from hell that they would be retreating, so he needed to call back his disgusting snake. When the doctor asked why, she reminded him that Siglis had yet to join the battle, and she didn't want to fight herself, so it was an inevitable loss. The doctor wanted to call back his appalling pet, but just before he could, the heroes had already commenced their attack on it in an effort to wipe their slate clean of the embarrassing performance they had in the war. While the healers continued their work, Usato was yelled at by Tong, who had brought a new soldier. The two fools had their little bickering but locked in instantly when the patient expressed his need for help as soon as possible due to poison. Just then, they saw a big flash in the sky. The heroes had successfully defeated the overgrown earthworm, giving them back their lost aura points and sealing humanity's win over demonkind in the war. The healers continued their work, and Rose popped up with news that the enemy was retreating, confirming their win again. She took a good look at her boy and began to smile. complimenting him for his good work as a healer. Upon hearing Rose's words, the potato head remembered his entire run as a healer, right from when he ran around like a zombie on steroids to mindlessly going on the assignment to defeat a death bear. Finally, Rose had acknowledged him as a healer, and he could finally see himself as more than a tutorial-skipping NPC. He began to tear up like a kid, forcing the gorilla lady to cover his face with a hoodie. She told him she didn't want to sympathize with his gruesome face, so he needed to put on his big boy pants and stop acting like a baby. She then thanked him for coming back to her alive, unlike her first group. Before Usato could utter another word, he passed out in her arms because of all the carrying he had done as a warrior. The great demon versus human first battle was won by humanity, thanks to a group of unappealing rogues who knew the wrong way to use healing magic. Some days later, Usato narrated the post-war events to the uninterested Blurin. The kingdom held a celebratory party to thank the heroes for their commitment and hard work. But Usato, who wasn't used to being in the limelight, bottled it by acting goofy. His dumb look forced the captain to smack him with healing magic, which hurt him seriously. While telling his story, the unattractive healer noticed his death bear had become fatter in his absence. Just then, Goblin appeared, informing our MC that his presence was requested at the capital. Prior to leaving, he advised the healer to be careful when passing town because of funny circumstances. But the neat head didn't understand what he was on about. Arriving at the town, he was hit with a reality check, reminding him that he was no longer a simple map decoration. The townsfolk surrounded him like flies on stinky fish and bombarded him with multiple rumors and thanksgiving, leaving our boy astounded. On his left was a cantaloupe thanking him for saving his son, and on the right was a citizen asking him how cracking the freaky heroine felt. A few moments later, he had successfully escaped the annoying crowd and gotten to the palace to speak to the king. The senile old man thanked Dr. Fixer for his heroism once again, and praised him for not being a fraud like Kazuki. He then gave the unattractive healer a mission report on the Dark Knight he defeated, explaining that the beast wasn't loyal to demonkind, so she cooperated with their investigation. But she refused to help them with the demon power hierarchy until they met her demands. The moment he asked for her sappy request, our boy realized the monster wanted him for some reason. Regardless, he agreed to see the knight, then he was accompanied by Suzune and Siglis to the dungeon. While they walked down the stairs, our MC asked why the freaky heroine came along. She declared that she was there to protect him, confusing Usato, who remembered her getting her butt kicked by the Dark Knight. Upon getting reminded that he was the one who could beat the knight, Suzune changed her stance to being a meat shield, making even less sense than before. When the healer asked if the villain had been treated after waking up, Siglis told him she wasn't, so he rushed down the stairs to the front of the monster. She was silently sitting and aura farming before the party got there, but when she saw Usato, she lost composure. Turns out demons are capable of crushing. Our MC requested to help the monster, but she refused, causing Suzune to call her an S&M fan, which invariably irritated Usato. He requested he be allowed into the cell, and Siglis agreed, letting Usato do as he wanted with his opponent. Although she was reluctant to offer him her hand for healing, the healer screamed at her, forcing her to comply so he could begin his treatment. Upon feeling Usato's warm touch, the demon's armor wasn't the only thing melting, but her heart as well. The healer put his hand on her face, making her feel emotions she never knew existed. When he was done, he requested she let go of his hand. However, she requested he leave it there for a little while longer, as he had not just healed her, but rizzed her up too. It is obvious she wants him to clap her cheeks hard. The next day, Yusa returned to his gruesome training with Rose. She decided it was best to change his regime because the old one was no longer as effective as she needed it to be. When he yapped about upgrading his magic, she made it known to him that it was beyond his measly abilities to do that so early. He thought it would be another set of physical enhancement exercises, but he was wrong once again. The tomboy decided to tease him with his training and gatekeep what he would be doing. Anxious Usato couldn't take the anticipation anymore, so she told him he would be learning how to dodge because not all wounds could be healed. Upon hearing that he would be dodging punches from Rose, the healer threw a fit, not wanting to die from one of the punches. The moment she heard he wanted to chicken out, she instantly grabbed his shirt and threw him across the open space. When he landed, she had already charged at him with a loaded punch, and in a flash, everything went blank. Some moments later, he woke up in the woods thinking his mummy had disowned him, but when he looked to his right, Rose was waiting with another loaded punch. The next day, He narrated his experience to the disconcerted Dark Knight and complained about how Rose was a heartless monster camouflaging as a human. When the Dark Knight asked why Usato was telling her all that irrelevant nonsense, he explained that Rose had an outing, so he didn't have any training and wanted to check up on Mrs. Grumpy. She blushed after hearing the healer wanted to see her. Then, like a tsundere, she requested he leave. Meanwhile, Rose had a meeting with the senile old king, who had 2 important requests for her. While Usato walked away, he remembered the first time he saw the Dark Knight as a helpless girl. Suddenly, he was distracted by a group of light balls moving around without direction in the palace courtyard, so he sought to check it out. Then he saw Mr. Perfect and Princess Innocent together. He walked up to Celia and asked her what was going on. She explained that Kazuki felt useless after the war, so he started practicing his magic better. Usato was amazed by his display and watched in astonishment as he manipulated his sus white balls. The moment Mr. Perfect noticed his friend's presence, he paused the training and walked towards his friend for a conversation. They reminisced their shenanigans from the war and its impact on them. When Kazuki almost slipped by, letting the princess know he had a near-death experience, he patched up by accusing Usato of clapping Suzune's cheeks, confusing the healer, who wondered what the allegations were for. Although he thought he had covered up, after Usato's departure, Celia stopped Kazuki from returning to training, asking what he intended to say. The hero was caught in the act, so he could do nothing but apologize to the princess. His friend, who was walking off, realized what had happened and laughed off his friend's stupid mistake. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, the Dark Knight continued her fantasies about Usato. When she heard footsteps coming her way, she assumed it was her crush and instantly prettied herself up. However, she was in for the surprise of her life, as her guest was the Queen Kong. Rose informed the demon that she had 2 choices from her. The first was to rot in prison, like the tomboy believed she deserved, and the second was to become a fallen demon. The Dark Knight was hesitant to answer, so Rose reminded her she didn't have a choice as she was a human captive. She then slammed the demon's head with healing magic to remind her just how powerless she was before Rose. The demon agreed to become a responsible individual, so Rose put on a mana-draining chain for the knight in gloomy armor, eradicating her protection and leaving her as a bare girl. When she attempted to complain, the gorilla lady landed a resounding hit that completely knocked the ex-demon out. While Usato was jogging with Blurrin to burn the Death Panda's fat, Rose popped out from the sky and blasted him down, reminding him that he was meant to be on an off day. He cheekily expressed that he was feeling restless, so he went on a jog, but his words suddenly stopped flowing after seeing the package Rose was carrying. When he asked what it was, she showed him the Dark Knight without her armor, confusing Usato. Rose explained that she was his new roommate, as the king had handed the troublesome girl to them as an assignment. As the demon started regaining consciousness, she saw Usato in front of her and concluded her supposed nightmare could possibly become a good dream. That night after dinner, Usato popped up in Rose's office to give a mission report. He informed her that the Dark Knight had calmed down after entering a warm bath, and she was now asleep in her room. Upon the completion of Usato's report, the Queen Kong told him news she had for him. The senile old man had finally decided to form an alliance with other kingdoms, so he needed messengers to help him get missives to the other castles. He had chosen the 2 heroes and requested Rose convince the unattractive healer to go as well. Our boy realizes his hands are tied already, and he couldn't deny such a request from the king, so he assured his master he would go. The next day, he set into town to get supplies for his coming travels. After entertaining some shy fangirls who wanted to speak to him, Usato received an apology from a marketman who constantly bugged him with rumors days before. While leaving the stall, he was approached by Suzune, who wanted to continue the funny business she started on the day of the war. However, Usato caught a glimpse of a girl he had been searching for. He rushed towards the site of the mysterious beastkin and grabbed her up like she was a lifeless teddy bear. The fox girl was completely unmoved by his show of power, and instead, Uno reversed the encounter by requesting Usato pay up for her services by healing her mother. Usato was shocked by the utterance of the fox girl and wondered what she meant. Although Suzune was trying to be an attention hog by making noise about the fox girl's beauty, she was completely ignored by the others as they decided it was best to move their meeting to a more secluded place for the safety of them both. Later that day, while the Dark Knight suffered in healing training with Rose and the Ogre Squad, Usato decided it was best to have his meeting with the Fox Girl in their home. The little beastkin introduced herself as Amako, a rare fox beastkin who snuck into their kingdom without the knowledge of her kind. While Usato and Suzune interrogated her, she revealed the entirety of her agenda. She left her village because her mother was sick and headed to Linger in search of a healer. Other humans had previously rejected her, and humanity was the only race with healers, leaving her her mother, who wouldn't open her eyes, in jeopardy. When asked why she didn't go for Orga and Ururu, she explained that they were too weak for the journey, so she didn't even bother asking them. Turning to Rose, she was simply too scared to even try approaching the dangerous Shikong, and she had seen in a vision that only rejection awaited her. Usato understood her plea and assumed it was possible to help on his mission transporting missives for the king. He believed it was best to ask the king before trying that out, but for better assurance, he would first inform Rose. While leaving the room to get Rose's permission, Usato informed Amako she could scream out for help if the freaky heroine was moving funny. Some moments later, Rose heard the gist of things and was left in a crossbreed between shock and irritation. She asked why Usato didn't inform her of the Beastkin earlier and told him it was best the king knew immediately. When Usato asked why, his master explained that oracles of time were extremely precious, even in the Beastkin world, so keeping one in their kingdom without the king's knowledge could possibly start a war. She decided she would meet up with the king herself. However, she couldn't promise Usato he would be allowed to follow the fox girl to her lands. Immediately, our boy returned to the room. Amako had read the future and knew exactly what he was about to say. She thanked him for helping her, but Usato was reluctant to accept her gratitude because he felt he was indebted to her for her prediction that saved the heroes' lives. That night, while the rescue team ate like the forest monsters they looked like, the Dark Knight struggled to put a single crumb of bread in her mouth due to irritation. Nevertheless, when Usato came in and advised her to eat, she started to reconsider. She asked whether her new life, worse than hell, would continue forever, causing Usato to laugh as he could relate. He handed her a gift he believed could help, and when she opened it, she saw a diary. He explained that it helped him get over Rose's stressful antics, so he believed it would help the Dark Knight as well. After collecting the gift and blushing, the Dark Knight took a look at the meal set in front of her and decided to eat as well, hoping it would sustain her for the worse than demonic training to come. In her journal, she wrote about how awful the training was. She ran until her legs gave out, and when she did crash from overload, Rose would simply smack her with healing magic until she continued running or blast her away like a piece of paper. She had decided Usato was a monster, just like the rest of the rescue team, who had lost all of their humanity. One afternoon, while jogging with the group, she heard strange noises coming from the center of the forest, just like the days before. When she checked it out, she saw Usato take a deadly punch that was definitely Saitama level if checked by a jobless power scaler. She confirmed her assumptions that he was a higher level monster upon seeing him get up and was scared for her life, that eventually she would be in the same boat as the healer. Rose and Usato decided to try his dodging exercise again, and the Dark Knight was completely astonished to see Rose disappear while trying to land a punch on Usato. The surprises didn't end there because Usato dodged the punch, a feat she couldn't believe was possible. While Rose left, she told the Dark Knight to follow Usato's orders for the rest of her training, an order the troublesome demon could finally work with. Some minutes later, she stood under a tree where Usato lay down, and they talked about how disastrous an individual Rose was. The healer suddenly remembered he hadn't gotten the Dark Knight's name, so he asked her what it was. When she informed him it was Felm, she was dealt with an anticlimactic scene as Usato appreciated the name for a nanosecond, then turned his attention to his death bear, who appeared out of nowhere. She walked up to him and kicked him in the shin for being utterly dense. But because Usato barely felt a thing, he ignored her once again and began to jog with Blurren, upsetting Felm even more. She ran towards the pet and its owner, then outpaced them with rage, claiming she wouldn't allow herself to lose to a smelly bear. Later at night, she was completely exhausted, as reported by the healer, and she would require him to carry her food to her sometimes later. While they ate, one of the ogres made a joke about Usato being inhuman. When he redirected the joke by claiming he was more human than Rose, he realized all jokes came at a price as a spoon approached him at the speed of light, piercing his face and entering into a nearby wall. After seeing the horrors their guerrilla leader was capable of, the ogres and unappealing healer began to apologize to each other, explaining that name-calling was a very bad thing to do. Some minutes later, Felm walked around the house in search of food. The instant she got to the dining room, she overheard Usato and Rose talking about his mission away from the kingdom. She was devastated that her crush would be leaving, so she set up a plan for the next day. On the other hand, Rose informed Usato that the king had made a decision on his appeal to help Amako, and they would need to visit him at the castle the next day. When the time came, Usato took Amako to the throne room, where they met up with the king. To the little foxkin's surprise, the king wasn't upset at her, but rather he appreciated her for helping Usato with the information that protected the heroes heroes and kept the kingdom safe. He assured her Usato would return her home and help her heal her mother because he had changed Usato's traveling plans to suit a journey to the land of the Beastkin. Some moments later, Usato was escorted around the castle by Welsi, who informed him of his journey. He would travel to the land of magic, then the land of water, which was directly opposite Beastkin lands. Amako was grateful, and Usato was thrilled, wondering what great adventure awaited him. Immediately, Welsi asked what knights he wanted to escort him. Usato decided to choose his old friend Aruku along with a background filler knight with dialogue who he had helped on the battlefield and aided him that one time. The knights were thrilled, and they promised to ensure Usato's maximum protection at all times. Meanwhile, Felm was chased and caught by Rose, who noticed her running away. Subsequent to an interrogation, Rose realized the foolish demon was simply upset by Usato's departure, so she decided to set up a special training routine to help out with that issue. When Usato got back, he was informed of Felm's attempt to escape, so he teased her about it. Although she continued to kick his shin, Usato assured Felm he would be back to clap her cheeks, so there was no need for her to worry. The tsundere demon began to blush excessively, so to save face, she stomped her way back home, leaving Usato to have a conversation with Rose. The Queen Kong told Usato to defend the honor of healing magic users while away, and after hearing her say she was expecting big things from him, Usato began to think about how far he had come. Right from when he was transported through the gate to the hellish training to the war, Usato had improved from a tutorial-skipping, background-filling map decoration to a full-fledged second-tier character. He stared into the horizon, aura farming, as he had become the second wielder of the wrong way to use healing magic. The next day, after receiving blessings from all their loved ones, the heroes set off on their journey to the other kingdoms. Rose and Felm set on a path of their own as well, so when Usato caught sight of them, he became lost in thought, wondering what it was they intended on doing. The moment he was snapped back to reality by his friends in the carriage with him, he appreciated how much he had adapted to his new world, waiting for the next big arc to show up. If you've gotten to this point of the video, let's confuse the fake fans by commenting Loch Ness Monster. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. See you guys next time. Stay Annie God.